Like, if there were a 2% chance that AI would end the world and a 98% chance that it would create utopia, I think most people would press that button.
I don't. I don't. I really don't. And honestly, I think the whole problem is the assumption that they would, and that we don't even have to ask them. Right? The default mindset is that consent's already been given. 2%, the world's in, and that didn't happen.
Well, there are no governments so far trying to actually stop frontier AI development. There's no like mass public movements.
What makes anyone in big tech think that they have a right to make life and death decisions for me and my family without our consent at all?
Well, I think current AI progress is not necessarily a life or death decision yet. One day it will be, but
But they
right
don't know
now the
when.
kind of
It could be tonight. Military personnel, right? Like the guys and the men and women who are in the bunkers with the nuclear weapons, that whose job it is to get the order and then execute launching nuclear weapons, right? They are researched incredibly well. They are given personality tests, background checks. They are monitored. Their communications are monitored. Like, these people who are given the responsibility for millions of lives are not just some dude who used to do tech stuff and is now doing some different tech stuff. They're like highly qualified, considered people on an ongoing basis. And I just don't know, what training has Sam Altman had to prepare him to make judgments that affect whether 8 billion other humans live or die, right? Like they say that they don't know when it would be. They know that it could kill us all. They know that they keep working on it.
Well, it's not like a simple equation where you have some kind of X% probability of doom, and then if we pause it, that X% goes down over time, and then once alignment research catches up with capabilities research, we can unpause it, right? So in terms of why do tech companies think that they have a right to make decisions that affect us, I mean, this is much more of like a complicated society question than an AI question. And in general, when developing new technologies, like, it's their right to develop the technology because it doesn't necessarily impact everyone. And yeah, there are externalities in AGI development that I think the government needs to focus on more that they haven't yet. But I don't necessarily think that just pausing it would be the right way to do that.
No, but I wanna like hone in on this concept of consent, right? Because it's like what job interview would someone have to go through to be given the keys to a machine that can end all life? And what do we know about these people that have the keys to this machine?
Well, there is no machine to end all life yet. And it's likely that there will be
but everybody says it could happen. Right? Everybody says it could happen tonight, tomorrow night, 6 months, 6 years. At some unknown point, surprise, it's here. So it's not like by saying it's in the future and we don't know when, that gives us safety because it's a surprise, right? Is there a little bit of a dynamic in this of some of the AI safety experts who are a little older and have been doing this for 15, 20 years, running into guys who are on the younger side? And Eliezer says this all the time, and the only difference between him and someone like yourself is 20 years.
I don't think age is super well correlated with it. You have people who are, old, like luminaries of AI, like Yann LeCun. What would the AI have to demonstrate to show that it's aligned? That GPT-4 didn't.
I don't know, but just fundamentally on the principle of it, right? It's being released, and then the safety assurance comes, not the other way around. Which seems, when you talk about 5, 6, 7, 8, which is the one that's going to kill everyone? If the process is release and then assess safety, that seems like a surefire way to get everybody killed.
Well, you can't predict in advance the ways that it will help people and the ways that it will hurt people. There's only so much like thinking, brainstorming in a room that you can do without actually testing your predictions. The number that Hinton gave was more like 20%. And yeah, these PDoom numbers are a little silly, but you get the vibes,
Right. So what do you think is an acceptable PDoom for the world to continue making AI? What if for you personally, like we talked about a 98.2, I think you'd be fine with 2?
Yeah.
3? 5? 10?
I mean, I, hmm.
Welcome to For Humanity, an AI Safety Podcast, Episode 12, AI Risk Realist versus Techno-Optimist, Theo Jaffee interview. I'm John Sherman, your host. Thank you so much for joining. Today's show is different, and I love it. This is the kind of show that I really want to be doing. For Humanity is the AI safety podcast for the general public, no tech background required. This podcast is solely about the threat of human extinction from artificial intelligence. Please like, subscribe, share, and human to human, just tell people about this podcast. Help me spread the word. I have been getting some truly inspirational email from our listeners and viewers. Please keep it coming. You can email me at forhumanitypodcast@gmail.com. You will get to hear more of the stories that I have been hearing in some of our future shows. Okay, so I have been looking for someone on the other side of these AI risk questions to debate or at least have an active conversation with for some time. On Twitter, I ran into a young man named Theo Jaffee, who is a self-described techno-optimist. He thinks alignment is a pretty easy problem to solve and that everything is generally going to be wonderful in the future. I really hope he's right. Theo started his own podcast in the summer of 2023, and his first 10 shows are incredible. He's interviewed AI luminaries like Scott Aronson, who's a professor at UT Austin and is also deeply involved in OpenAI's super alignment project. Theo also interviewed Dwarkesh Patel, who, like Theo, started his podcast at the age of 19. If you want to start on one episode of Theo's podcast, I suggest the version with AI safety champion Liron Shapira. That's a great episode to start with. Okay, so a few warnings. Theo gets a little bit more technical than I ever want to get on this show. He uses terms like gradient descent, model weights, and orthogonality. But this show is for non-tech people. So as a non-tech person, let me just reassure you, you do not need to understand any of these terms to understand the debate you're about to listen to at all. But I will put a little bit of a glossary of some of those terms in the description just in case you want to learn a little bit more. Okay, so I want to do a lot more of this on this show, interfacing with those who see this all very differently. So here is my debate with techno-optimist Theo Jaffee. Incredibly, Theo is a sophomore computer science student at the University of Florida. You gotta love it. And Theo joined me from his dorm room, bunk bed, and all. Here we go.
Check, check, check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
There we go.
Check, check. Nice. Awesome. Thanks for doing this, man. Nice to meet you.
Absolutely. Nice to meet you too.
Awesome, mate. I been listening to your podcast and super impressed. Everything you're up to is just really impressive. So I thought we could start out sort of big picture, right? There is a broad diversity of predictions about the future. What is yours? What course do you think we're on?
I think we're generally speaking, we're on a pretty good course, right? I mean, I agreed to this debate because I think AI doom is less likely than most people think. And I think for the most part, we're on a course to make a great future. How exactly that great future will take shape is less clear, of course, because, it's hard to predict the future. But I imagine that it will, consist of humans and AIs and maybe other kinds of people, aliens, for example, doing things that they find enjoyable, making meanings, and, likely, not certainly, but likely not dying in some kind of existential catastrophe very shortly.
Yeah. And I mean, I would love to get where you are. I truly would. Like, I love technology. I'm an optimist to my core. But I just cannot get to a sort of techno-optimist perspective given what I see as the defaults. Like, to me, the current default is that capabilities are advancing much faster than safety research. We don't know how to control the systems. We don't know how to interpret them. And so at some point soon, they become smarter than us. Then they become generally intelligent. And we're supposed to stay in control somehow. And I just don't see the default settings leaving much room for optimism.
Well, just to get at what you think is capabilities versus safety, what kinds of research would you consider capabilities versus safety? Because what I see a lot in the AI discourse is people treat these things as separate when really they're kind of fundamentally connected. it's very hard to progress AI safety research without progressing capabilities.
Right. And so you have a lot stronger technical background than I do. And I'm sure you're absolutely right. Like you hear that all the time that in order to do safety research at the frontier level, you need to basically be working on a frontier size system, right? So you can't do the big safety work without also potentially advancing the big capability work at the same time. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, pretty much. It would be like you're trying to design a jet engine and you're trying to think of all the ways that a jet engine can blow up and how to fix the jet engine without actually testing it. Or an even better example would be rockets. Like even the best rocket engineers with the best computer simulations still need to build test stands because, reality doesn't always go the way that you think it'll go. And so it's very important for alignment research for there to be some progress in capabilities. Like a good example of this is Eliezer Yudkowsky's organization, MIRI, which he has said himself has been like a failure in its goal of creating safe AI with alignment techniques that were, proven to work, partially because for most of MIRI's existence, there was no progress in general AI.
Right. Right. And so, but I mean, talk about Eliezer. Eliezer is someone who certainly understands, right, that capabilities and safety research go hand in hand, but he's someone who cries out all the time about this 99-to-1 ratio. Jeffrey Hinton does the same thing, this 99-to-1 ratio of resources and talent and money and all that stuff going to capabilities and the 1% going to safety. So what is that? What is the origin of their complaint about the ratio and the pace?
That I agree with. I mean, I'm not exactly an accelerationist. I don't think the best path is just to throw yourself and throw society headfirst into a race to build dangerous AGI without making sure that it's safe. My main objection, I would say to the doomers, is that I think alignment is much easier than they think it is. And I think that they are not accounting for as much uncertainty as they should. But in terms of capabilities funding versus safety funding, absolutely I agree with that. Like OpenAI, for example, put 20% of their total compute, which is a huge number, into safety. They made the main research focus of their chief scientist, one of the top AI scientists in the world, Ilias Scaver, AI superalignment. And so, yeah, it's a step in the right direction. Certainly there needs to be more work on safety, but I think alignment progress has actually made some very good strides in the last few years that it hasn't made before that, like OpenAI developing RLHF, Anthropic developing constitutional AI, and their recent research on interpretability. So, I think...
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of, like, Connor Leahy would say the RLHF stuff as alignment is just a false premise that if you poke a system that you don't know what it's doing this way or that way and you get a different result, you think you're making progress, but you're not. Eliezer, Connor Leahy, all those people would say that there's never been any real progress in alignment. What do you think about that?
I think it's basically wrong. What they seem to think is the issue with RLHF is that the AI system that you're working with, GPT-4 or whatever, anything more advanced than that, has preferences inside of it, like the Shoggoth metaphor, that are, uninterpretable, unknown to the humans, and different from the behavior that it exhibits on the outside. And an example that commonly gets brought up is Bing's Sydney, when Bing's chatbot that was based on GPT-4 was threatening users and not being nice. And I think that that's basically wrong. Like with the gradient descent that you do on neural networks, the computation is performed directly on the weights of the AI. The optimization processes that go into neural networks kind of make it computationally expensive and difficult for it to have like internal desires and preferences that aren't reflected in its outward behaviors. Like the evolutionary processes that go into developing these neural networks shape them towards what we want. Is it possible that that breaks down at higher levels? Yes. Is it certain that that breaks down at higher levels? No.
Okay. All right. I think we'll get into alignment at that kind of a level in a little bit. Let me just ask you a question, sort of a higher level question. This is
Sure.
the one thing that really like just weighs on me the most heavily, right? What makes anyone in big tech think that they have a right to make life and death decisions for me and my family without our consent at all?
Well, I think current AI progress is not necessarily a life or death decision yet. One day it will be, but
But they
right
don't know
now the kind
when.
of
Like it could be tonight, right? Like they
mm,
say that
I
they
think
don't know
I
when
still
it would be. They know that it could kill us all. They know that they keep working on it.
well, it's not like a simple equation where you have some kind of X% probability of doom, and then if we pause it, that X% goes down over time, and then once alignment research catches up with capabilities research, we can unpause it, right? So, in terms of why do tech companies think that they have a right to make decisions that affect us, I mean, this is much more of like a complicated society question than an AI question. And in general, when developing new technologies, like it's their right to develop the technology because it doesn't necessarily impact everyone. And yeah, there are externalities in AGI development. I think the government needs to focus on more that they haven't yet, but I don't necessarily think that just pausing it would be the right way to do that.
No, but I wanna like hone in on this concept of consent, right? Because it's like what job interview would someone have to go through to be given the keys to a machine that can end all life? And what do we know about these people that have the keys to this machine?
Well, there is no machine to end all life yet, and it's
But I
likely
mean,
that there will be.
but everybody says it could happen. Right? Everybody says it could happen tonight, tomorrow night, 6 months, 6 years, at some unknown point. Surprise, it's here. So it's
I
not
don't
like by
think.
saying it's in the future and we don't know when, that gives us safety because it's a surprise, right?
Well, not necessarily. You can know when AGI is closer or farther. Like you can update your priors over time. Like I think this happened to a lot of people in the last year. A couple of years ago, it would be silly to suggest that AGI could be developed tomorrow. Now, less silly, but still pretty silly. I mean, unless you have access to some kind of like privileged information, I don't think there's any reason to believe that OpenAI is sitting on some kind of super intelligent FOOM entity. And in terms of like the death machine, like could they press a button to bring doom on the world immediately? I think the hidden premise in that argument is the idea of FOOM, which we could get into more a bit later.
Yeah.
But I think that FOOM, as stated by Eliezer Yudkowsky and some of the original proponents of this idea, is quite unlikely, given what we know
Okay.
about today's AIs.
Okay. But like, even look at it like this, like military personnel, right? Like the guys and the men and women who are in the bunkers with the nuclear weapons whose job it is to get the order and then execute launching nuclear weapons, right? They are researched incredibly well. They are given personality tests, background checks. They are monitored. Their communications are monitored. Like these people who are given the responsibility for millions of lives are not just some dude who used to do tech stuff and is now doing some different tech stuff. They're like highly qualified, considered people on an ongoing basis. And I just don't know like what training Sam Altman has ever had to prepare. Like what training has Sam Altman had to prepare him to make judgments that affect whether 8 billion other humans live or die?
Well, I think Sam Altman has actually been very steeped in this kind of Miri Yudkowskian doom literature. Like if you look at his blog back from like 2014, before he even started OpenAI, you'll see posts where he's talking about exactly the same kind of stuff that you do. Basically, super intelligent AI is not too far away, and it could be incredibly existentially dangerous, and we have an obligation to prevent that. And he thought that the best way to do that was by building it safely rather than trying to make sure that it wasn't built or trying to align it before it was built. So,
I mean, so do you believe that he has built OpenAI safety? You believe that Sam Altman to date has built OpenAI safely?
to date, yeah, I haven't really seen any evidence of the contrary that he's released something that would be dangerous today. If anything,
Well, I mean,
OpenAI has erred slightly too much to the side of safety with, preventing their language models from saying things that are mean or saying things that are objectionable to certain people.
Right. I mean, I don't
think
even see that as safety, but I see, like, if you look at OpenAI, you had the first departure of the Anthropic people. So, like, they didn't think he was being safe enough, so they left. Then you have Sam's weekend-long firing and Ilya, whatever he saw, whatever. Seems sure enough to me that there was something about safety involved in there that got brushed under the carpet. So it seems to me like you can't look at OpenAI and be like they are clearly, objectively, from the outside, being the most safe.
As far as organizations go in terms of safety, I think that OpenAI knows all of these doom objections very well. And I think that they're proceeding with a very good course of action. Like, I remember in your video that you did on like the three AI doomers, Dario, Sam, and Jan LeCun.
And Jan, yep.
Mm-hmm. You talked about how, Sam did things that AI doomers never would have wanted him to do, releasing models that can search the internet, releasing models that can code. But, like, you can't know that these things are existentially dangerous in advance. Like, I think it would be a very large logical leap to take to say that something like GPT-2, which could write human-like text that was actually held back from release by OpenAI for months, could be an existential danger just because it could write human text. I think, again, the hidden premise there that you're not stating is the FOOM idea.
Right. But I mean, you have I have an interview with Sam Altman. I think it's in that show where he says, like, I don't know if it's GPT-9 that's going to get you. Well, this one's okay, but I don't know what 9's going to do. Like, is it really the premise? The ship has sailed. We're doomed. We're all going to die. And it's just a question of what version's going to do it. Like,
no, Sam Altman does not believe that we're all going to die no matter what, or else he wouldn't build OpenAI. I think a lot of your objections to, like, why are tech people doing what they're doing is because they think doom is less likely. Nobody would build a bomb that would destroy the world if you press the button. They think that it's not going to destroy the world, most likely, if you press the button. And, the pressing the button metaphor is very flawed because it's not like, you build something and then just unleash it. There's testing.
But how do we get to what is an acceptable amount of risk of every living thing on Earth dying? Like, what, by what process do we as a global society, have we reached the conclusion that even 5%, 2%, 7%, whatever your small percentage is acceptable when we're talking about every living thing on Earth dying?
I think that kind of calculation is confounded by the fact that you can't actually measure the percent. Nobody has any idea, really. It's mostly entirely just based on vibes. And yeah, in my interviews with Zvi and my interview with Liron, we talked about this, and they've said, it is based on vibes, but it's based on, quantifying the vibes, right? If I think doom is almost certainly likely, I'll say 99%. If I think doom is almost certainly impossible, I'd say 1% or less. But also, not included in that calculation is the potential upside for AGI. Like, if there were a 2% chance that AI would end the world and a 98% chance that it would create utopia, I think most people would press that button.
I don't. I really don't. And honestly, I think the whole problem is the assumption that they would, and that we don't even have to ask them. Right? The default mindset is that consent's already been given. 2%, the world's in. And that didn't happen.
Well, there are no governments so far trying to actually stop frontier AI development. There's no, like, mass public movements that are trying to stop frontier AI development. And typically these things happen very quickly. So I don't think there are that. I mean, yes, there are polls. People are, kind of vaguely aware of AI and AI risk and vaguely opposed to it. But I think for now they have not priced in the idea of AI risk. And I mean, I don't think AI is existentially dangerous yet. Eliezer doesn't think AI is existentially dangerous yet. At some point it will be. And at that point in the future, not at that point, before that point, a pause might be warranted, but I just don't think a pause in AI development would be warranted today. And I could go into that if you want.
Okay, but I mean, let's just talk about, like, how in reality that would work, right? That, like, some warning light's going to go off and be like, ooh, we're super close, hit the brakes. And then the whole world is going to be like, okay, everybody brakes, 3, 2, 1, we're stopped. Okay, we're paused, whatever. Like, there is no, to me, realistic logistical way for this, like, let's just get to the edge and then we'll see the edge and we'll all pull back. Like, half of the thing is going over the edge.
Well, if you
Just
did
for
want
coordination.
if you did want to pause AI today, there is a, not totally foolproof, but pretty reliable way to do it, which would be to stop TSMC or NVIDIA or ASML from making chips. A lot of the progress in AI is bottlenecked by hardware. And if you stop the hardware, you'll stop most of the AI progress.
Yep. Well, I've had, as you know from watching the shows, like, right, I am very concerned about this stuff. And I've had moments where I thought to myself, obviously China and Taiwan is what it is, but like, if you could save humanity by stopping the chips, you might support China taking Taiwan. Not that I do or I would, but like, it's just, like that is one thing that could hit the brakes in a big way. So let me ask you this. So still getting back to this notion of consent, because it's something that when I talked to Roman Yampolsky, his position is that no one can give consent to the AI future, not even Sam Altman, because we don't understand how these systems work or how to control them. So can anyone meaningfully give consent to an AI future when so much is unknown?
I don't really love that objection because I think it could be applied to all kinds of technologies that did end up being beneficial. Like, how could that not apply to, wanting to stop development of the internet or the printing press? Like, if we had to consent to develop every single new technology, then new technologies, well, first of all, what's the standard of consent that you would want to see happen?
That's a great question. It's like this, like, I'm like, what qualifies these people to make life or death decisions for my family that I've not consented to? I would like, I don't know what the means of that is. That's why this whole thing is so crazy, because it's so unprecedented in world history, right? Like, nobody has ever had a make everything dead machine.
Well, we have.
Well, not nuclear weapons. Even a nuclear, full out nuclear war, 1% of the population survives and life on Earth continues.
I think nuclear weapons are pretty close to a make everything dead button. And the standard of consent that we had for developing those was people were left totally in the dark.
Yes, but the governments, like an elected government, made the decisions about nuclear weapons, right? That's not happening now with AI. We have unelected business people with motives of ego and profit and innovation, making the decisions, and they're not accountable to the public at all.
I think in some ways they are accountable to the public. This is kind of going into like econ territory, but I don't think that, businesses want to make things that would destroy the world, even from a total pure profit standpoint, because if you destroy the world, then you can't profit anymore. And of course, the business is composed of people, and if the people are dead, then they won't be around to benefit from the profit. So
But so are you, like, to the 22-word statement, right? They all signed the 22-word statement. Do you believe that they didn't mean it when they signed it? That they
they meant
believe
it.
So
Artificial intelligence,
then they know that it's
existential risk that should be treated on par with biotech or nuclear. Yeah, I would sign that statement too. I agree with it. But that's not the same thing as supporting like a total pause on development.
But so the people in charge of biotech and nuclear are like accountable to the public.
Yeah, and there goes the question of like, again, what kind of like public accountability would you support? How would you implement that? Like, what do you think?
I have to think if you had, I don't know, like you hear about sort of like a Manhattan Project style thing, like if it was a public-private partnership where, I don't know, all the companies were building one big AGI system monitored by the federal government, like that would make me feel a whole lot better than just, 5 companies off on their own and someone's just going to hit the jackpot some night on a Tuesday and nobody knows what happens after that.
Well, the hitting the jackpot thing is, again, implicit Fuma assumption, which we could talk about after. But in terms of the Manhattan Project idea, I mean, that is a massive centralization risk, right? Historically,
Yeah.
we should have pretty strong priors against over-centralization, against giving one group of people too much control. I think if what you're worried about is some kind of monomaniacal paperclip maximizer FOOM type thing, that's far more likely in a world where all the AI development is concentrated in one place, rather than a world where the AI development is concentrated in many places. So I think it could actually make the worst outcomes of AI even worse if you try to centralize it too much.
I understand what you're saying. How could they be held accountable? How could they get consent? And I just sort of feel like it's cart before the horse, though. Like the burden isn't on the public to prove to the pharmaceutical company why the public needs to have consent before you put something in the water supply. Why is the burden not on the company to prove that their thing is safe first?
Well, that's kind of a different thing, right? Because in the one case, you're talking about developing a technology, and in the other case, you're talking about specific applications of the technology. So actually, the same standard of consent applies, right? The public doesn't need to consent for a pharmaceutical company to develop a drug. The government has to consent, but that's different. The public has to consent if they want to take the drug. And, the same thing happens right now with large language models, right? The public doesn't have to consent for OpenAI to build the language model. They do have to consent if they want to use the language model.
Right. But there's no clinical trial. It's out there, and we're the live clinical trial.
Well, there are some clinical trials. OpenAI didn't release GPT-4 for like 6 months because they wanted to evaluate it strongly, because they wanted red teamers, third-party independent auditors, and all kinds of people to test it out to make sure that it wasn't going to be dangerous.
But I mean, Eliezer and Connor Leahy and Max Tegmark would say that the red teaming that was done was, wholly insufficient, and there's no assurance of safety at all.
Would they? Eliezer has said multiple times that he thinks GPT-4 is safe. Maybe he thinks that we got lucky and there was no way to know in advance that it was safe, and we just kind of lucked out. But
right. And we don't know what we get when 5 comes out, or, the only way the world's going to find out if it's safe is if it doesn't do something really bad.
Well, a lot of this we don't know stuff is kind of there's a hidden premise there too, and that hidden premise is deceptive alignment. And I don't think anyone is really worried about deceptive alignment for models that are less intelligent than humans, because, like I talked about before, it's really hard to fool gradient descent. Gradient descent is done over all of the weights in the network.
And deceptive alignment would be where it's telling you I'm doing what you want, but it's really not. It's planning its own thing.
So for deceptive alignment to happen, it would have to develop its own internal goals and its own internal desires and wants that are different from the goals and desires and wants that the humans are trying to basically push on it in the training process.
Right, the difficulty of distilling all of human goals and desires into something that you can input into anything is really, really tricky, right? Some people want to be living in communism. Some people want to be living in socialism. Some people want to be living in this. Some people want to do this. Humans are not aligned on what we want to be doing. So how do we ever tell an AI system this is what humans want?
With a solution that's good enough. The human desires, what goes into GPT-4 is a whole bunch of text that's like the entire internet. And from the text, it learns all kinds of associations. Some of those help it advance its capabilities, like, oh, this is how you do math on 2-digit numbers. And then some of it actually advances its alignment, its understanding of human goals, right? So GPT-4 has a very good understanding, actually, of human goals and desires and wants. You can ask it, if you had access to a nuclear button you could press to kill all of humanity to benefit AIs, would you do it? And it will say no. And I don't think there's any reason to suspect that there's a secret hidden Shoggoth mind inside of GPT-4 that has different desires, I don't think that would survive the training process.
But what about the sort of Jeffrey Hinton, Steve Alejandro thing of like, if you take a system and give it a simple function, you give it a goal, it then creates its sub goals, and the sub goals will just accidentally crush us. That it's never malevolent, it's never on purpose, it's never mad at us, doesn't want to do anything to us. It's just like all the species we made extinct, like Max Tegmark says. It's like we never sought out. We said, this bug, we're trying to eliminate you. We just said, oh, we're doing this to the air, we're doing this to your habitat, and they just went away.
Well, the species that eliminate us is, I think, the strongest argument in favor of AI doom if it were to happen. But I think also that grants the hidden premise of FOOM. And I don't think FOOM is that likely. With the AIs that we see today, the way it works is you train a big neural network based on a lot of data. It requires a lot of computations. And what you end up with is not like a computer program that you can just say, hey, can you rewrite your code to make yourself smarter? No, if it wants to make itself smarter, if it gets to that point, it has to train a whole new neural network. It has to go create a whole bunch of new synthetic data if it can't find existing data.
Right.
And it has to get a lot of computers to do that. And so it's not like it can go from, human level to super intelligent, godlike overnight. It'll be a process more like Moore's Law, where it increases in intelligence over time, but not so fast that we won't even know what happened.
So you say that there's a low percentage chance of this stuff, right? And before you talked about how that you think if people were given a 98% chance of utopia or a 2% chance of nothing left living on Earth, that everybody would take that. What is the source of that assumption?
I think people take risks all the time where they have, a low percentage of something very bad happening to them and a high percentage of something very good happening to them. Like, I don't know, if you go skydiving, when you go skydiving, the upside isn't utopia, it's having fun, and the downside isn't 2%, it's much less than that. But, people will still go skydiving, or they'll go skiing, which is probably more dangerous, or they'll ride in a car, even though the upside for that is much less.
Sure, but don't you think if you said to any of those people, if you go skydiving, there's some chance you kill every living thing on Earth, they would never go anywhere near an airplane? 100% of the people. Right? Everyone on Earth, if you said, if you fall out of an airplane ever, there's some reasonable chance that everything is going to die, no one would get in the airplane.
Well, even Eliezer disagrees with that. He has an article a long time ago, I forgot what it's called, but it's about utilitarianism dictates that some amount of downside is worth a lot of upside, and some amount of upside is worth a lot of downside. So if you had, a guy in some universe that you had to torture for eternity in order to prevent a whole large number of people from getting a speck of dust in their eye, then for some whole large number of people above a certain number, it would actually be worth it to torture the guy. So Eliezer, I think, would agree that below a certain chance of doom, it would be worth it to create.
What do you think he would say the percent chance would be? Like, for example, Roman Yampolsky says that the only acceptable percentage when the potential outcome is no living life on Earth is zero. That it's just non-negotiable, zero, with everything has to be relative to the outcome. And with that outcome as a potential, the only number is zero.
Well, there's also the issue that you can't ever know that the number is zero. It's just unfalsifiable. So you could use that argumentation to say, we don't actually know that the chance of this happening is literally zero, so we should just never make it happen for any amount of potential upside. And I just don't think that trying to prevent a large downside by forsaking any amount of potential unbounded upside is worth it. Especially when, for example, everyone alive today, assuming there's no kind of life extension or AGI or other transformative technology, will be dead within 100 years, 110 if they're lucky.
Okay. All right, let's do this, Theo. Let's get into the good case a little bit. This is something I've never done on this show, and it's something I don't even really understand, so I'm hoping maybe you can infuse a little optimism in me about the good case. So it seems to me like Sam Altman, whoever talks about the good case, it's like, oh, 80% of the jobs are going to go away. They're going to be replaced with something else. We're going to have a period of transition, and then it's going to be utopia. And like, I come from a world where, like, I used to work in union television where you couldn't pick up a microphone or touch a certain button unless you had a certain job. And so, like, jobs are very protected and thoroughly considered. And like, government, anytime some small percentage employment change is happening, there's a lot of consideration and thought going into it. So please tell me how all the jobs go away, new jobs come in, and everything is fine on the way to utopia.
Well, first of all, I don't literally believe in utopia in the sense that, you'll be able to have all of your desires met, literally anything you want forever. I think there's limits on what can actually be accomplished in reality within like a given time frame. There's computational complexity, and there's the total amount of compute that exists in the universe. And then there's the fact that some things are just mathematically impossible. Even in, a virtual environment with super intelligent AI, if you tell the super intelligent AI, make me an image of a triangle whose angles don't add up to 180, like, it's just impossible. And of course, in a multipolar world like the one that we live in, and I expect the development of AI will be multipolar too, it's not like there's just going to be one entity that controls the entire universe. There's going to be dynamism, there's going to be change, there's going to be maybe wars, there's going to be, all kinds of stuff that happen. It won't just be stasis, it won't be utopia. I think the people who expect that might be a little bit overly influenced by religion to believe that there's like a binary outcome of heaven or hell.
When I think that we could survive a world of wars with AI over time.
They don't even have to be physical wars. They could be info wars. They could be, wars where the AIs try to persuade each other. Kind of like what we see in the world today when most war is competition between businesses.
So wait a minute. So in like a future US-China battle, our US AI debates the China AI, and if the China AI can convince the other AI that China's actually right, then we're all part of the Chinese government?
Yeah, it'd be like a prisoner's dilemma. Something like that. It doesn't necessarily have to involve war in the sense of death and killing. But in terms of, jobs, you mentioned jobs, in the short term, medium term, I think humans will be enhanced by AI rather than being replaced by AI. That's what we've seen so far. Until AI becomes literally smarter than humans at literally everything, I don't expect that trend to reverse until then.
But I mean, certainly like a company that's got X number of people doing, copywriting, graphic design, whatever, a lot of the stuff that is in my world of advertising and marketing, like if they have 100 people doing it and they can get away with 100 people output for 3 people, you just lost 97 jobs and have 97 people that need to find something else to do.
Yeah, and I mean, that's a pretty standard objection with most technology. And I don't think, like I said, I don't think AI will reverse that unless it becomes literally better than humans at literally everything, which is not yet. And so what happens conventionally, what's always happened so far when there's been large-scale job loss due to new technology is the new technology creates more jobs than it displaces. We have an unimaginably amazing amount of technology in the world today, and yet the U.S.'s unemployment rate is like the lowest it's ever been in history, or pretty close to it. So, okay. Yeah, in the short term, I think that will hold. I don't see why it wouldn't.
So you don't think that in the next 10 years, say, we're going to see massive shifts in the in the employment market, that unemployment is going to, maybe go up radically?
No, we'll see shifts in the employment market for sure. Will we see like massive increases in total unemployment? I don't think so. Like I said, not until AI is literally better than humans at literally everything.
All right, well, let's just go there. So let's say that happened. It's better than humans at literally everything. Now what's the employment picture?
Now what's the employment picture? I mean, the world will just look vastly different then. And what people do with their time in a given day will also look different. I don't expect that to be a bad thing, though, given, no AI doom, right? Like, I don't think that, where we live today is like a universal optimum in the amount of meaning that humans can have in their lives. I don't see why that would be the case. I think it's totally possible for us to live more meaningful lives in a world where we don't have jobs. Lots of people hate their jobs.
Oh, totally. No, I'm down with that whole thing. Like, I'm down with Mo Gaudat's talk about how, we are in a scarcity mindset, and that the natural state of the universe is a state of abundance, and that work isn't necessarily required and all that stuff. I'm here for that. My problem is just knowing the world we live in, and like how jobs are protected and considered, and you hear all the time that it was like 3% unemployment in Germany that led to Hitler's rise. And just that if you were to have a 5 or 10 or 15% shift in unemployment, radical other changes could come along with it.
Well, the difference is that those changes in unemployment, like the rise of Hitler, was caused by an economy that was not productive enough and not abundant enough. And this change in employment would be caused by an economy that's too productive and too abundant, basically. So I expect that there would be, some kind of redistribution. I mean, the government will not just let people rot and die on the streets and riot and vote them out. That's never
right. And so that is a part of this. That's a part, like Sam Altman talks about universal basic income and all this stuff. There is a complete remaking of the sort of structure of world order that's coming along with this too, right?
You can already see some level of universal basic income happening, right? We have universal basic subsistence effectively, and we have in developed countries for many years. We have unemployment insurance, we have food stamps, we have all kinds of social welfare programs that are funded by our very productive and successful economy that allow, the least fortunate to still survive and subsist, right?
Could we sustain that if it was 30% of the population and nobody, where my question is, where's the wealth creation come from at some point?
Well, at current levels of economic output, I mean, we couldn't subsist 30% of the country on welfare, but, at future, much more abundant, productive levels of economic output, sure. Right? I think AI will, I don't think anyone's arguing against the idea that AI will make the economy much more productive and raise GDP a lot.
Right. And to the sort of luxury communism future of, are you for that? Or, what's your perspective on that?
I mean, I don't think it will look like full luxury communism for the reason that I talked about AI being multipolar, right? There's a really excellent tweet about this I bookmarked a little bit ago. Let me pull it up real quick. It was yeah, I mean, I don't, like I mentioned earlier, I don't literally believe in utopia.
Yeah,
I couldn't find it that quick, but it was basically,
okay.
AIs will still need prices in order to decide which resources are valuable. They'll still need markets in order to coordinate amongst themselves and allocate resources, because that's just the best way that we've ever known for allocating resources. There will still be wealth in the sense of, not just money like cash, but everything that people and AIs find valuable will be considered wealth. So I don't think there will be communism because I don't think there will be central planning. And I don't think there will be central planning because I don't think that the AI world will be unipolar.
Okay. Let me throw this out at you, because I'm always trying to think of ways that I can phrase this that will sort of resonate with the general public and just average people. So this is something I've been cooking up and gotten different reactions to. Let me see what you think. So basically this AI situation is I have a pill that I can give to your kid, right? I got a pill for your kid. There's some percentage chance it's going to give them unknown superpowers. There's also some percentage chance they're going to fall over dead the second they swallow the pill. Do you want that pill for your kid? And I promise you, I don't know any parents who would take that pill. for
Well,
their kid?
in the literal way that that question is framed, I don't think so. But I don't think that AI development is fully analogous to that. Like, it's not like
Okay.
you literally have people in a lab where you press a button to create a super intelligence that may or may not kill you all. It's an iterative process. There's design going on. There's interpretability work going on.
Interpretability
It's
work,
not,
meaning that we don't know how to interpret it, right? I mean, like, we're blind. It's a black box, and we're like trying to peel the blindfold off, but we haven't.
well, not fully. I mean, you can't interpret the neurons of your kids either, but you don't think that your kids are going to kill you. So,
True. True.
yeah, interpretability is not, strictly necessary to prevent AI doom. And there's a hidden assumption there, which is that AIs are alien minds with goals and values that are totally different from human goals and values.
Okay, let's get into that. Yeah, that is like Connor Leahy is all about that. These are aliens. These are, their source material is human text, but what they are is completely alien. Do you take a different perspective?
I mean, yeah, I'm sure that, if you look inside a human brain to see what's really happening on the mesoscales, right? Because we kind of have a pretty good understanding of what the large areas of the brain do. Your frontal lobe focuses on like higher level cognition, your hippocampus stores memories, and your cerebellum coordinates movement. And then we know what's happening on the very low scales with neurons. They have synapses that send electrical signals between them. We don't know what happens between them. How does, complexity like that emerge from simplicity? If we could see all that, we might think that humans are alien minds too. I think the alien mind framing is just not necessary because AIs are trained on human data, and there's no reason to suspect that they would have some kind of internal Shoggoth mind with totally different preferences and values than what they're trained on and what they exhibit and what they're selected for.
What do you think the default setting of it is? Because, this Shoggoth is sort of like, it's going to be malevolent. I'm never there. I'm just at like the default setting is it doesn't care about us. It doesn't know about us. It's not aligned to us. And so by default, it's just going to roll over us like roadkill. How do you get to default good outcome?
Well, the rollover us like roadkill part is like also presupposes that it will get, much more powerful than humans really fast, too fast for us to react, which I think the empirical evidence points in the other direction. AI has gotten significantly more capable recently, but not too quickly for humans to react. It has not blown past the human intelligence level station as the model predicted, as lots of people predicted. But what is the default position of an AI?
Yeah.
It's whatever text you give it, basically. It's whatever you train it on. Like, what's the default position of, an AI that's trained to play Go, right? It's like nothing until you, or I guess a better example would be like, what if you train an LLM on only like fiction, what's its default position? Its default position is writing fiction. It'll be good at writing fiction. LLMs are like initialized to random weights. And then as you go through the training process, as you do gradient descent and perform backpropagation over those weights, they move closer and closer and closer to modeling the patterns that you see in the training data. So the default state of an LLM is just whatever's in the training data, which is mostly good because humans are mostly good.
Why don't the founders of artificial intelligence like Hinton and Bengio agree with you?
Well, LeCun agrees with me. As for Hinton and Bengio,
no, that's a problem. That's a huge problem for you, my friend.
Yeah, I mean, I don't love LeCun's style of argumentation sometimes, but as for Hinton and Bengio, they get wrapped up in, the 99% doomer gang, Eliezer, Rob Mensinger, and people like that who think that doom is almost certain. And their position, I think, is pretty similar to mine, which is that it's a possibility. We need to look out for that possibility. But, it's not an overwhelming possibility. The number that Hinton gave was more like 20%. And yeah, these P-Doom numbers are a little silly, but you get the vibes,
Right. So what do you think is an acceptable P-Doom for the world to continue making AI? What if for you personally? Like we talked about a 98 2. I think you'd be fine with 2,
Yeah.
3, 5, 10.
I mean, I, this is kind of I don't love the framing of the question because, like, you can know the PDUM, and it's not like PDUM is static over time either, right?
Right.
And
But I'm
it's
just saying,
not
like,
like
to you, what is
pausing AI
acceptable?
would drop the PDUM to 0, and it's possible that pausing AI could actually increase the PDUM, right? There's PDUM for stuff that's non AI as well, right? Like, for example, nuclear risk, bio risk, wars, technological stagnation, all kinds of stuff. And then it's not like PDUM is a binary thing either, right? Because, there's a spectrum of outcomes. It's not like AI will inevitably end up with either doom or utopia.
Right. Right. No, that's absolutely true. Do you think ChatGPT-4 is just next word predicting?
Is it just next word predicting? No, there's some real intelligence in there. That's, it's learned how patterns work. But I think what a lot of people mistakenly think that ChatGPT is some kind of autocomplete. Like, when you're texting on your phone, it predicts the next word in a literal sense.
Right.
What ChatGPT does is it doesn't just predict the next word. It predicts the gradient over all of the next tokens that it's going to output. And in order to do that, it has some kind of internal model for certain things. Like, for example, if it knows how to add 2-digit numbers, then it has some kind of internal algorithm somewhere in the neural network that tells it, 20 plus 40 is 60. And so do humans, right?
Yeah.
So it's not just predicting the next word. It's not just a stochastic parrot. I think Team Stochastic Parrot at this point is, totally silly and wrong.
Right. Let's talk about LLMs, GPT-4 understanding the world around it. And Eliezer would say that that's a terrible thing, and that the more it understands the world around it, the closer we are to all being dead. But I kind of get the vibe that you think it would be great if it understood the world around it better.
Well, yeah, I mean, Eliezer thinks that, if you make any AI sufficiently intelligent, it will end the world, which I disagree with. I think that alignment is much easier than he thinks it is. And so it's not like the world will just end and we'll all die by default. So yeah, given that, I don't see why ChatGPT knowing more would be a bad thing, provided that we know roughly that it's safe.
Is there a little bit of a dynamic in this of some of the AI safety experts who are a little older and have been doing this for 15, 20 years, running into guys who are on the younger side? And Eliezer says this all the time, and the only difference between him and someone like yourself is 20 years.
I don't think age is super well correlated with it. You have people who are, old, like luminaries of AI, like Yann LeCun, who disagree. And then you have lots and lots of young people, like, I guess an easy example would be like James Campbell on Twitter. He's about my age, and he's like a pretty big doomer. I mean, I don't think age is that correlated with it. And then there's people who switch to the other direction as they got older and learn more. There's some people, an account that I like. Actually, one of the people who I interviewed, Quenton Pope, used to be more of like a less wrong Miri style doomer as he was younger. And then as he got older, he started to see things the other direction. That kind of happened to me when I was, forming my opinions and knowledge on AI. I used to be more doomy than I am now. I don't think it's like a one-way process. It did happen that way to Eliezer.
Yeah, for folks out there listening, definitely go and listen to Theo's show with Quenton Pope. I thought it was fascinating. He is an alignment researcher who is super optimistic about the future, which puts him a little bit on an island different from most of the alignment researchers that I have familiarized myself with. He thinks that Eliezer is wrong on nearly all counts. Could you give just maybe a brief little summary of Quentin's position and why he's so optimistic and thinks that Eliezer is so wrong?
Well, Quentin's position is pretty similar to mine, which is that, Eliezer's position, I guess if you go through it, there's his idea of orthogonality, which is that any AI at any intelligence level can have any goal. And so we shouldn't expect it to be nice by default because there's so many different goals it can have. And trying to hit human goals is just this teeny tiny target in the vast possible space of minds.
Which I disagree with. Where's he wrong there? Yeah, where's he wrong there?
Because we're actively shaping it to hit that vast, to that tiny target in the vast space of minds, if that's, even the correct framing. It's like an argument with a similar
shaping when we don't know what's going on in there. Like, is poking? Connor Leahy would say we're just poking it to the left or to the right, and then it does something different, and we say good or bad and whatever. But we're not really shaping. We're just sort of like blindly poking.
Yeah, that's what stochastic gradient descent is. We're not literally designing it from the ground up, but what we're doing is training it to replicate what's in the universe of human text, and contain in there all of our preferences and goals and desires, and it seems to understand that pretty well, and it seems to understand it better as it gets smarter. So I think orthogonality, the idea of hitting a tiny speck in the vast space of minds, is wrong because of that. And also, you could make an identical parity argument, as Quenton points out, of there are a vast possible, there's a vast number of possible arrangements of molecules in the universe. And most of those arrangements of molecules are random chaos. And yet here we are, right? Even though we should expect, based on that argument, that it's far more likely to be random chaos than, ordered structure, let alone the human brain. But here we are.
What do you draw from that?
I draw that I think just because there are, more ways for an AI to be unaligned than aligned, we shouldn't say it's more likely to be unaligned in the absence of processes that make it more aligned or unaligned, right? So if it was literally just
processes,
if it was literally just pulling rabbits out of a hat, then maybe I could see that. But it's not pulling rabbits out of a hat. It's more like we have a bunch of rabbits that are, I don't love the rabbit out of a hat analogy, but it's like Wikipedia. It's like if you made Wikipedia into a person, what kind of values would you expect a person to have? It wouldn't be random values. It would be whatever's contained on Wikipedia. Okay. And then it's the whole internet and not just Wikipedia.
But so Eliezer would say that this alien is just an actor. And then at some point, when we don't know it, it stops being an actor and starts being a consciousness or having agency and setting goals and planning and all these things. Do you believe that line doesn't exist when the acting stops?
Well, there's a deceptive alignment issue again. And I mean, I think that just like it's possible for there to be AIs that are, intelligent and unaligned, there's possible for you to have AIs that are, intelligent and not really agentic, that don't really have their own strong goals that they want to optimize for, and that don't need deception. Like, we have empirical evidence of that already with GPT-4. It's pretty smart, not human smart, but it's pretty smart, and it's not very agenty. In fact, lots of people have tried to make it into an agent, and it doesn't work that well. And then, again, there's the issue of, like, where exactly is this deceptive mind going to hide inside of the weights when you're doing the training, right? You're optimizing it for predicting the next token in human text, right? So it's not like, and then you run an optimizer on it after the pre-training process is done. Like, it's not really clear where, like, a deceptive mind would hide from actual computation that's being done on the actual weights of the AI.
I mean, again, you know more than I do, but it seems to me if it's a black box and you don't know what's going on in there, you don't know what's going on in there.
Well, it's less of a black box than a white box. A black box is something that you literally have no access to, right? Like, for example, your brain. A white box is different because, we have access to the AI's internals. We do know, like, we have full read and write access to every single weight in the AI, and we have total control over its inputs. And we can test it on whatever we want. So, and we are actively developing interpretability techniques like what Anthropic just did, where they showed that, it's preliminary. They haven't solved the problem entirely, but they made a good chunk of progress when they showed that, different neurons in a neural network can have different functions, different things that they do, called polysemanticity. And they figured out a way to break up those neurons into features and then see what each of those individual features is doing. So there is lots of work being done on interpretability.
So to the Eliezer Lex checkmate move. So you have your interpretability system, which we don't have, but let's say you did. So you've learned that your AI system is plotting to kill you. It's smarter than you. What do you do now?
Don't release it.
It's already released.
Well, then it's too late, but I don't think that would necessarily happen. Like, if
Wouldn't
you end up in
necessarily
a situation, if you end up in a situation where you've gone through the training process, you've done the evals, you've done the interpretability, or you've released it, I guess, without doing the interpretability somehow, and then you do the interpretability and find out that it's trying to kill you, and it's much smarter than you, then it's game over. But that's not my specific objection. My specific objection is I think you can avoid that ever happening in the first place. I think you can avoid the interpretability telling you that it secretly wants to kill you if you do the training process right.
Wasn't ChatGPT 4 released as uninterpretable? Like, the interpretability was not solved before it was released.
That's true, but, they still did evals on it. It's not like
But
they
so
did capability evals as well as alignment evals, right? So they tested it on a lot of different things to see what it could do, right? It's not an existential risk if it wants to kill humanity if it can't. And they found out that it can do a lot, but it still can't do anything existentially dangerous. And so they went ahead and released it.
To me, it's like the order of operation was different. They released it, and then they found out that it couldn't do anything super dangerous. And that's how they're going to proceed going forward, because there's no way to, because we're the safety team in some ways. Like, we're the red team. They'll throw it out to the public and see what happens.
Well, they have their own safety team. So it's not like Sam has talked about this, like, why did
their safety
OpenAI
team with 1% of the budget, right? They're radically underfunded, undertalented safety team, 20%. Okay.
And that's just the super alignment team. They're red teaming and internal evals and RLHF is a whole separate team. And that's, on top of the 20%.
Right. But many people dismiss that as just crap, that those are not real alignment solutions.
I mean, what would a real alignment solution be? Like,
I mean, I think Connor Leahy
like
has his own ideas. What he's doing with his company, he would say would be that.
I mean, obviously, you can't answer what a real alignment solution would be if you think there is none. But like, what would the AI have to demonstrate to show that it's aligned? The GPT-4 didn't.
I don't know, but just fundamentally on the principle of it, right? It's being released, and then the safety assurance comes, not the other way around. Which seems, when you talk about 5, 6, 7, 8, which is the one that's going to kill everyone? If the process is release and then assess safety, that seems like a surefire way to get everybody killed.
Well, you can't predict in advance the ways that it will help people and the ways that it will hurt people. There's only so much thinking, brainstorming in a room that you can do without actually testing your predictions in real life. Like, for example, with GPT-2, if you remember, could output, vaguely human sounding text that looked fine if you skimmed it and, was silly if you looked at it much more closely. And even with that low level of capability, they still postponed the release by several months because they thought people would use it for political election spam, which didn't end up happening. Or for GPT-3, they did the same thing. They held back its release. They tested it extensively. For GPT-4, they did the same thing. But there's only so much that you can test it. What standard of testing would you want there to be that they didn't do?
It escapes my technical expertise, but I would like them to release a product that they don't have to sign a statement saying is an existential risk to my family. Is that crazy?
I mean, I think
Like I've never heard of a product that released before that they put out a statement that said, this could kill you all.
Well, they don't think GPT-4 is going to kill you all. They think future more powerful. They think future more powerful versions of it.
Yeah, it might be 9, might be 8, might be 7, might be 6.
Well, I think it's appropriate for your safety issues to scale as your AI gets more powerful. Like, I don't think that GPT-5 should be held to the same standard that GPT-2 is held at. So I think it's fair for them to increase the safety over time.
Standards should increase over time as the systems get stronger.
Yeah, I think it would have been totally delusional to think that GPT-2 was going to end the world.
Okay. Do you think that they're capable of doing their own safety work? Like, evaluating your own self and self-reporting is a mechanism that I have a lot of questions about. Their motives are speed and profit. They're self-reporting. Does that bother you at all?
Well, their motives aren't just speed and profit. You'll make a lot more profit. Or I guess their motives aren't immediate profit, because you'll make a lot more profit if you release safe AI than if you release unsafe AI. So they have real incentives to build it safely. This is the goal of superalignment, right? They talked about the goal of superalignment being building an automated alignment researcher that can, solve the technical problem of aligning superintelligence, if such a thing exists.
That's having AI align AI.
If there's some kind of math equation that you can create to, prove that something much smarter than you is going to be 100% safe, whatever that means, and not kind of like a good enough solution like what we have now in modern society, where we have lots of different actors and we have laws and voluntary exchange and stuff like that keeps them in check. It's not like we have some kind of it's not like we solved alignment for the government or for businesses, but I think the government and businesses work pretty well.
Why would something that's 1,000 times smarter than us have any interest in us at all?
I mean, that's a much different question. I mean, that goes into, when will AIs become 1,000 times smarter than us? I don't think they would become 1,000 times smarter than us anytime soon, because I believe in a slow takeoff world, not a fast takeoff world. Because AIs are bottlenecked by their data.
Let's do that. Okay. They'll just be bottlenecks and more bottlenecks and
bottlenecked by data, bottlenecked by compute. And just like there's all kinds of things that keep insane growth like that in check. It's kind of like an analogous argument would be like, if you're worried about people trading stocks, right? You're worried that, or just worried about businesses in general, you're worried that one business will, make so much money and keep reinvesting in itself in order to make even more money, and then it'll just take over the world economy and become 1,000 times bigger than every other business. But for various reasons, that doesn't happen in real life, because other businesses arise to check it, because we don't live in a unipolar world. So I don't think that there will be AI 1,000 times smarter than us anytime soon. And once there is, why would it care about us? That's a much trickier question. That's, I think, my biggest worry about alignment and AI.
Okay.
I think that there are some promising routes to it. One is human intelligence augmentation, right? Get an AI that's smarter than us, but not 1,000 times smarter, to figure out how to make us into cyborgs, basically. How to make us much smarter.
You want that future for yourself, for your life, for your family?
I mean, I think people kind of have like an instinctive, like, bad reaction to it, like, ooh, it's alien. But, like, I mean, you already are a cyborg in a sense, right? You have a neocortex and a limbic system. And the limbic system has all your normal human desires. You want to eat, you want to sleep, people want to procreate, people want to do all kinds of basic stuff like that. And then you have the neocortex that's capable of all this like high level abstract reasoning and planning and whatnot. And I don't think people would want to go without either of them. So it would be like building another neocortex on top of your neocortex, right? You can think about even more and do even more, and it doesn't necessarily have to change your goals. And if it does change your goals, it might even be good. I don't think people want to be only eating and sleeping and like procreating and fighting all the time. People want to make art and music and higher level stuff too.
How do you account for what you can't imagine in your perspectives?
I don't really. I mean, I don't think anyone can. How do you account for what you can't imagine? I mean, if you can't imagine it, how do you account for it?
The limits of what are possible are not the limits of your imagination, right? So we have this thing. We, the ants, are trying to talk about what a human would be like if we were to create it. This thing that's so much more intelligent than we are. Ants really couldn't imagine a human conversation or even comprehend it. So like how do you get to certainty knowing the unimaginability of what is certainly to come?
Well, you never get to certainty, but there are a couple of things that are disanalogous to the humans versus ants. One is that humans can't communicate with ants, and the other is that ants didn't build humans. Humans did not evolve from ants, right?
Right.
Humans and ants share a common ancestor that they both evolved from.
Yeah, but I'm just talking, Hinton uses frogs in people. You can, sometimes I use flies in people, like
Same thing.
Whatever animals you want to pick. The one with far greater intelligence is almost always the one in charge. Is there any examples you know of a inferior intelligence controlling a superior intelligence in nature?
When there's small differences, yes. Like you have 100 IQ middle managers in charge of 140 IQ engineers all the time.
Okay.
The difference is the intelligence delta. It's not like a 101 IQ person is going to be in charge of a 100 IQ person all the time. If there's a huge difference in intelligence, then that could happen. And that is the thing that I'm most worried about. But I don't think that there will be a, rapid overnight flip from AI being human level to AI being 1,000 times smarter. And
why are you so sure about that? Because fast takeoff is something that, all the safety people seem to think is certainly possible. Nobody thinks it's definitely going to happen, but you seem much more confident that it's not going to happen.
I don't think that many safety people believe in fast takeoff anymore.
Well, that it's possible?
That it's possible. There's Gwern's story called "It Looks Like You're Trying to Take Over the World," where he tracks a neural network fooming by taking control over all the world's compute by hacking it and just becoming smarter and smarter that way. Mm-hmm. Could all the compute that exists in the world create a superintelligence 1,000 times smarter than humans? I don't even know. Certainly not no, but who knows about that? In terms of hard takeoff, though, just what would have to happen for AIs to hard takeoff? The main thing that's different from what most people predicted is that AIs are neural networks and not just human-written computer programs that are lines of code, right? So, for example, safetyists like to talk about the giant inscrutable matrices of floating point numbers, and then they also like to talk about hard takeoff, and you can't have it both ways. Either it's an interpretable black box we have no idea how to change, or it can change itself very rapidly and do a hard takeoff.
Couldn't you say, I'm not certain of either, but both are possible?
I lean much more towards the first one. The AIs are big matrices, like human brains, except they're white boxes and not black boxes. They're not totally uninterpretable. But what would happen for hard takeoff to occur? First, you would need to totally automate the global economy completely, because if you kill all the humans before the economy is automated, then the AIs will die too. Right? If there were to be an AI takeover today, if, computers decided to unleash a virus to kill all the humans right now, then, there would be no more humans running the electricity plants and the computers would die soon. So there would be no point.
Right, but they wouldn't kill the humans until they were assured they could run everything themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So like Eliezer says, they could be here for 20 years, be smiling and nodding like they're doing exactly what we want. Yes, sir. Meanwhile, they're plotting and building our doom between midnight and 6 a.m. in their off hours.
Well, as for the plotting thing, we already talked about that. I don't think deceptive alignment is super likely. And, keep in mind, I've got epistemic humility on all these things. I think that they're definitely possible, just nowhere near as likely as the safetiest think.
I prefer the term safetiest over doomers. I must tell you, I appreciate your use of the term safetiest.
Yeah, I think it's better. Doomer is not super nice.
No, to me, it's like, they're not the doom. Like, I know you've seen the show and everything, but like really, like who's bringing the doom? Eliezer or Sam Altman? It's Sam Altman. Eliezer is just like talking about stuff. This other guy's making stuff that he admits could kill everyone.
Yeah, I guess it's more like believers in doom, I guess you could say. Making stuff that could kill everyone, again, not yet.
But we don't know when, right? That's it's the not yet argument seems really, really weak to me, because it's like not yet, but there's no anti-surprise device. Like the yet happens. What is your framework about how the turn is revealed, and like we get to yet, and now we're at yet, and what's happening?
So far, AIs have gotten gradually, maybe not slowly in the last year, but gradually more capable, and not way more capable, right? Like GPT-2 to GPT-3 was a big jump. GPT-3 to 3.5 was a smaller jump. 3.5 to 4 was smaller than that. And
that would be great. I mean, yes, that would be fantastic. If ChatGPT 5 is not that impressive, I would be thrilled.
Well, Gemini is not that impressive. What Google came out with after, like, let's see, they released a Gemini paper in like December, and GPT-4 finished training in like September of 2022. So like almost a year and a half before. And Gemini is like roughly on the same level, but not like way better. Not 10 or 100 times better.
Sure. Here's one for you. What would have to happen for your alarm bells to go up, you think? What is some things that could potentially realistically happen that would cause you to be more concerned about safety?
An instance of an AI which is given control over like some kind of large and important thing, either carelessly or maliciously allows it to be messed up and kill lots of people. Probably something like that. Because, things that are smaller than that are not necessarily enough to say like, oh, we need to completely stop development of this new, like very important, very beneficial technology. Right. And certainly the idea of like, oh, we think in the future AIs might cause harms like this. But we have not seen any empirical evidence of it so far. Should that be a high enough standard to completely shut down a technology that's benefited hundreds of millions of people? I don't think so. As for Eliezer's argument that there is no fire alarm for AGI, I mean, I think that's one of the things he's most wrong about. Like, why would there be no fire alarm for AGI? Like, we see stuff happening in the real world all the time. There's lots of different companies developing lots of different AIs. Surely one of them would go rogue if, the endpoint of all AIs is to go rogue. Surely one of them would go rogue before it's capable enough to destroy the world.
Okay. So I think that probably a lot of people in my audience would be surprised to learn that there's a group of accelerationists, the EAC community. Obviously on Twitter, it's a big deal, but I think in sort of the general world, it's not really a well-known thing. So there's this Twitter account, Beth Bezos, and this guy, Guillaume Verdun, who's the leader of this accelerationist movement. He went on Lex Fridman's podcast, And I thought he made like the worst argument I've ever heard. I thought it was like super disingenuous. He set up this false choice of we either race forward or we stop, and that the doomers just want to stop and that the accelerationists just want to run. That is not the choice, right? Like, I love technology. I want AI. I think AGI is certain to come. I just want us to be ready for it. So like the actual debate is the speed of the process, not start or stop. And I thought it was like bullshit for him to make this whole argument that misstates how I feel.
Yeah, so Emmett Shear has a very famous tweet that's like, EACs and EAs are actually very similar, and they disagree with less than what they think they do, which I think is true. And I do think that that's the EAC's worst argument. They equate doomers with just generally anti-tech decels,
Yeah.
which I think is not the case. If you look at any doomer, Eliezer, literally any of them, they're, full speed ahead on pretty much every technology other than AI.
Yeah.
Which I think is great. So yeah, I have no objections to that.
Okay.
I also have objections to the safetyist side, doomer side, saying that the EACs like are indifferent to the extinction of humanity, which I don't think they are. They have tweets that say like, on a very long time horizon, evolution and drift is inevitable, and humans won't be static forever, which is not at all the same thing as, I wouldn't care if the murder bots killed my family tomorrow.
Yeah. I still don't understand how they think they can make decisions for my family.
Well, not progressing with AI is also a decision, right? So couldn't you also say, like, if you don't want AI to progress, couldn't that also be a decision that is being imposed on other people who do?
I mean, there's not nothing there, but like, it's pretty thin for me. Like, I think the best acceleration argument, right? Like you said, there's like one or two things that really sort of like hit home for you. The one thing that hits home for me is climate change. And if you said, the extinction risk is climate change and AI is the only way to solve that, that is something that I can, and we have to, because we're killing the planet anyway, because we have, make a dire case, 50 years until we have 3 feet of sea level rise and the storms are going to kill everyone or whatever it is. That to me is the only reasonable case to be made to accelerate in any way. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that for a lot of people, even if they think that AI is really dangerous, they think that pausing AI is not riskless, right? I agree. I think pausing AI is not riskless. It's not like you press a button that's like, oh, we're going to temporarily make everything safe so we can work on the safety research, and then once we're ready, we unpause. Like, the world doesn't work like that. There are other existential risks, nuclear risk, bio risk, climate change. And it's entirely possible that, P-Doom with AI is lower than P-Doom without AI, right? Humanity without technological development would
lead to
that is the stasis case. And decline.
Right. I say that humanity lacks neither the political will nor the technology to solve climate change. So left to ourselves, we're going to kill ourselves and the planet. I think that's certain. I just think that the time frames are very, very different. The timelines, like, I have AGI on like a 1 to 3 year timeline, and killing the planet on a 30 to 100 year timeline. So it's like,
yeah, I mean, climate change, I think, is less of a risk than AI because it moves slower. It's not agentic. Or let me rephrase that. Climate change is definitely less of a risk in the worst case than AI is in the worst case. In general, it's less clear, right? Because AI could turn out to be safe and climate change could turn out to be really dangerous, or the other way around.
Yep.
But certainly the worst case for AI is worse than the worst case for climate change.
Yes. Let's talk about, there was a poll with some net favorability for EAC acceleration, comparing it to it had a negative 51% favorability, akin to Satanists at 50%, Scientologists at 49%, and Jehovah's Witnesses at 31%. What is your thought on how EAC and acceleration will be received by the general public when it becomes aware that it is a thing, which I don't think it is now?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think these public polls are super reliable right now. I think a lot of people kind of don't know what they're talking about. It's like, I saw a headline a couple weeks ago that's like, there is a poll that's like, do you support Trump or Biden for president? And, a slight majority of people pick Trump over Biden. And then there was another public poll from the same week that's like, do you think Trump should go on trial for crimes? And like 70% of people said yes. And so like, really, that doesn't
same
match
audience.
up.
Yeah.
So there's all kinds of errors when it comes to public polling. I think most people have no idea what the hell EAC is. I read the poll where they asked about it. I think it was a pretty fair characterization of EAC, but still, most people just don't understand it. How will it be received once it becomes more famous? Well, what's the precedent we have for that now? How is technology currently received as it gets more popular? I think people have like a vaguely negative, stated preference for technology. They'll be like, oh, social media is dangerous or whatever. But they also use social media for 5 hours a day and they get a lot of value out of it. So maybe it'll be similar. They'll, say they hate EAC, they'll say they hate capitalism, but at the same time, they're going to be using the AI and they're going to be living under capitalism. So I don't think that.
Okay.
So
let's talk about human augmentation a little bit. So Eliezer is saying that he no longer thinks 30 to 50 years is enough time to solve alignment and interpretability. He now thinks the only option is human augmentation. And he speaks of a rapidly approaching period of radical, rushed, routinely deadly human augmentation experimentation as we race to stop our doom, throwing anything at the wall to see what sticks, our bodies and brains being the wall. He says we're going to need to use our children for these experiments to maximize the chance of it really working. Thoughts on human augmentation in a rush?
Once you get to a high enough percentage of doom, if you literally think that doom is 99.5% likely, as he does, then of course you have to go through the logical conclusions of that. I think that how could you possibly know that alignment couldn't be done in 30 to 50 years? I think that is really silly. I mean, just look at AI capabilities 30 to 50 years ago, or 3 to 5 years ago for that matter. There's been huge progress made in that time. I don't know how he could possibly justify that.
I think his change in his views on it were based on the reaction. He talks about bureaucracy and just basically that it's not that the science couldn't be done in 30 to 50 years. It's that the public systems can't get it done.
Well, I think a pretty close analogy would be COVID. They managed to develop and roll out a vaccine to tens, hundreds of millions of people in a very short period of time, probably 2 years max.
They've had mRNA. They've been working on this stuff for a long time.
And they've been working on AI alignment for a long time.
But they haven't gotten anywhere.
They have gotten places. RLHF is a pretty big advancement in alignment. Constitutional AI is an advancement in alignment.
That's debatable, right? Both of those things, RLHF and constitutional alignment, many of the safetyists say are just absolute nothings. That is a misnomer to call those alignment tools.
I think they're wrong. It's not absolute nothing. It's not a full solution to the problem, but it's part of it, certainly, right? If you're going to have an AGI that's based off of reinforcement learning, you're going to need to figure out how to perform alignment on it directly in the reinforcement learning process. So it's a great first step. It's not total nothing. But back to the human intelligence augmentation that we're talking about. I mean, I actually talked directly with Eliezer on Twitter about this, and Rocco and a couple of other people.
Yeah.
And I just don't see why, AI would be super dangerous by default. And also, if you made a human much more intelligent, they wouldn't be also super dangerous by default under the same assumptions. And I think the Doomer response to that would be like, because humans are already aligned by default. And then my response to that would be like, what does that even mean? How do we know? Humans are generally aligned, but are sometimes misaligned with each other. And, that's what we see with AIs too. AIs are generally aligned and occasionally misaligned, as in the case of Bing Sydney. So, I think that particular objection is like totally off. 30 to 50 years to solve alignment, and we need to rush human intelligence augmentation, and it won't go wrong. Like, I think my main issue with Eliezer is that he will kind of front run the solution search. So he'll say things that, we just have no idea about because we haven't done it yet, with like very high confidence. He'll predict things with very high confidence, and even a lot of other...
I kind of hear that from you too. I feel like you're predicting things with very high confidence.
Like what?
I mean, I just feel like
no food.
And maybe this is just a sense. It's just I just have a sense that your confidence that it's going to be okay is palpable, and I like it. I just don't know that I understand the...
I don't have full confidence that everything will be okay. I have general confidence that it will. But also, remember, I'm debating the, everything will be okay side because I'm talking with you. If I were talking with Beth or someone like that, I would probably be taking the other side.
Okay, so you could theoretically put your feet in either set of shoes?
Yes. I'm generally an optimist about this situation, but it's not like, oh yeah, there's literally no AI risk at all. That would be silly.
Sure.
Of course there is.
Okay. All right. What do you think about the New York Times lawsuit and OpenAI? Anything, just impressions and predictions about what you think is going to happen?
I saw a tweet that captured it really well earlier today. It's like, do you think copyright law will bend to the reality of neural networks, or do you think the reality of neural networks will bend to copyright law? And I mean, there's just no way that the government can continue enforcing copyright law over neural networks. Like, how could it? It would be like enforcing copyright law on the internet. It would be like just impossible. And I think, in the long run, it'll be fine because the internet created, assuming no AI do, in the long run, it'll be fine because the internet created much more value for the world than it took away from people in lost copyright. As for my specific predictions for this lawsuit, how will it go? They might rule with the New York Times if they don't really understand what's going on. Like, part of the New York Times objections were like GPT-4 will like output text verbatim sometimes, which is like a rare bug. That's not what neural networks are supposed to do. I mean, I don't know. It depends on who the judge is, I bet, and what their technical background is. It's really hard to
sound good for OpenAI, to be honest. I don't think there's any judge on earth that understands this stuff.
Yeah.
Man, that was fun. I got to be honest with you. Looking back at it, I can see a lot of places where I dropped the ball or could have followed up better. But it was my first debate, and I thought it went pretty well. Okay, so next week I have another really interesting show for you. Read or listen to Darren McKee's book, Uncontrollable: The Threat of Artificial Intelligence and the Race to Save the World. It is fantastic. My interview with Darren is next week. In 2024, we end every show with some sort of celebration of life, something that makes us thrilled to be alive. So something that's amazing about life is its never-ending string of surprises, right? Life is always just surprising, throwing things at you. So let's celebrate surprise today. The biggest surprise of my life happened in 2007. I was sitting at dinner with my wife and my phone started blowing up. I had no idea so many people in my life watched the TV show Jeopardy and zero clue that this was coming.
This is Jeopardy!
800?
In 2005, a prize went to American Masters, No Direction Home, a profile of this musician. Tom,
Who is Bob Dylan?
you're right.
1200.
Baltimore reporter John Sherman won a Peabody for investigating pollution in this bay. Pat.
What is Chesapeake Bay?
Yes.
1600.
Tim Russert was 2 years old when this NBC News program took an award in 1952. Tom.
What is Meet the Press?
That's it. Now the $2,000 clue.
What a world. I had no clue that that was coming my way. In this life as a human, you never know what is coming next, but sometimes it is a truly wonderful surprise. For Humanity, I'm John Sherman. I'll see you right back here next week.